Hello, so tonight I'm going to try and do my very first drawing using my new XPPEN magic drawing pad. So that's obviously the box for it, that's what it looks like. And tonight what I'm going to try and draw is this scene from Stromness. I am recently returned from Orkney, and I was doing a tour of various islands on Orkney to basically draw them and sketch and so on and lead sketching workshops. So there was a lot of places that I really got to know well, and Stromness is one of them. And this really sort of shows the sort of scene that is so typical of the area. So with that, I will pull the tablet into view, and we'll see how we get going, so that's it there, and I will just start to draw away, and we'll see how we get on. So hopefully you enjoy following me in this sort of drawing. And what I'm going to do is I am now going to open there are various pre-installed apps, but the app that I am going to look at is Sketchbook, and that is my sort of favoured sketching app. Now, this particular one that I've got is just me sort of doodling my studio, and I will now just close that one down, and I will create a new sketch, and I'll do it in landscape format, and I will create. So I'll just save that one to the gallery, right? And we can now actually just get going. So at the moment, that was set to use a sort of chisel tip, but I'm now going to change that to a pencil. You can see in this puck here that the pencil appears there, and it says that it's 4.4. So 4.4 is the number of pixels. I might just change that up a little bit. If I do that on the slider, could change that and just pick how thick it is, and so on. And at the moment the opacity is set at 77%. So if we just start doodling away, you could see the sort of line I can get. So for me, for this particular sketch, that seems reasonable. I've also set it so that it's a sort of dark blue, purpley, indigo type pencil, and that seems about right for this. So I've just undone that, and we'll see how we go. You can see that I can drag this puck around. So I'm just going to get going, and we'll see how I manage to do this with the camera and the light on above, and I'll just begin to doodle away, So I'm just going to start by picking out the sort of eaves line and so on up here. And what I've found so far is that the pen is really quite responsive, that the actual pen that I'm drawing with just now, and that it really is quite a natural sort of drawing experience. This is me just sort of picking out the gutter and so forth at the moment, and then we've got a downpipe, and I can really sort of set this so that I can actually really draw quite thinly. If I just show you there, that's me drawing a lot more lightly there, just pulling that in, and that shows the sort of sensitivity in terms of the sort of line that you can get. Just sort of picking out this guy with the sort of Stetson may well be an American. There was a lot of Americans over in Orkney. Just pull him in there. And if I draw sort of left to right, I can actually then switch off the sidebar there, because it sort of expects you to sort of move over, so that's fine. And then just getting in his jeans and so on. Oops, don't quite know what I did there. That was me sort of dragging up from the bottom. That was just me rather than the pen. I suppose the thing is that you really sort of need to draw down, and that's maybe just me working with this particular app. I just need to get the hang of it on this particular operating system. So we then have this wall that sort of curves its way down to the bottom and curves its way down to the bottom, and we can just see that you then have the coping stones and so on that come through here. So that's working quite well. And I think what I'll do is I will just nip back the point size of the pen just a little bit, just so that I can begin to draw in a little bit more detail and so on. So this is me getting the window frame in and so forth. And you can see that I'm managing to get really quite reasonable alignment with the tip of the pen and where it appears on the screen, that I'm not really tending to get crossovers and things like that. So thus far that is working really quite well. So the line is tending to appear where I want it to appear, which is obviously always good, but you don't have to sort of strain to, you know, work around misalignment and so on. And just pick that out a little bit more there, and then get this light in to the side, and then we've then got the window to the side of that again. And you can see that generally I'm managing to really sort of put the lines in where I want the lines to be. So that is definitely good. I'm just going to bounce up the point sizes here, because you know that's one of the beauties of working digitally, is that you've got one pen, but it can obviously change depending on, you know, what you want to draw. So I'm just darkening in the windows there, and that works quite well there, so that's fine. I'll just do that with this side one here as well. I think generally you know, I'm enjoying the way that I can actually draw on the glass, and certainly that isn't normal. That isn't always the case, you know, that some tablets it can feel as though you're sort of skating on ice a little bit, but generally the feel of this is really quite natural. So you know, that's definitely good. I'm just gonna get this sort of the foliage and so on that's in this particular area, and just sort of draw that in a little bit more. And I always tend to be quite scribbly about that, so I'm just going to scribble away and just pull that in. So that's fine. I'm going to just drop the pen width back again. Now, one of the things that I can do is that I think I can basically record the drawing. So that's me switched on the record function now. So we'll see how that works out towards the end as well. So this is me continuing to draw in the downpipes and so on, and then I've got another window just to the left of that, just to the right of that rather. And again, you could see when I'm doing things like rectangles and windows and so on, that I'm getting the pen to really register quite easily. So that's definitely half the battle. That's me going a little bit quieter there, just because I was drawing something that I was really sort of paying attention to. So that is always the drawback of sort of drawing live, because occasionally you sort of begin to really sort of think about it, and you go a little bit silent, as I did there. And this is me just sort of drawing in the coins on the corner of the building. So that's me got that bit. Now, what you could see here is that I have been leaning on the glass so far, and thus far I've not had a problem with PAM rejection or anything like that. It sort of worked the way I would want it to work. And basically that means that the tablet is sensing the fact that the pen is close to the glass, and that it's to ignore my hand, you know, that it's not to pick up the hand and draw with that. So that's good that it's working like that. Just get that bit of skew in there. And oops, I keep turning on that particular menu down there at the bottom, and I suppose I'll probably just get used to that and know how to avoid it. So this skew sort of comes up at a funny angle there. I think the whole building is sort of angled, and we've then got the chimney that sort of comes up, and we've then got the coping on the chimney, and it sort of goes like so, and then it's sort of asymmetric or something like that, I think. But again, you could see that my lines and so on are really registering really pretty well. So I am happy with that. You know, I think a lot of people would probably be, in a way, surprised by digital drawing. You know, a lot of people that are watching this video may well be really quite used to it, you know, but I think there's a lot of people out there that don't really know that you can actually draw like this. So you know, it's interesting just to share this knowledge in a way. So I'm just going to draw in that line below the gutter and so on, just fairly lightly. And then we've then got this line in about here, which is the string course. I'm sort of drawing these in left to right because it makes the menu disappear, and I'm drawing right to the edge of the canvas, the electronic canvas, you know. So we'll get that window in like so, and like so, and then that sort of comes in like that, and then we've got two astragals and then a single astragal down the middle there. And just off to the left, we've then got a sort of porch that comes in there, and yeah, keep switching that menu on as well. Probably just need to get used to the menus that I can pull out so that I can avoid just triggering them accidentally. And then we've got sort of pilaster here. This is the Stromness Museum that I am drawing at the moment, which is backs onto the harbour and so on, and looks along the harbour back to where the ferry to the mainland of Scotland's pulls in. So the Hamnavoe, which is the Northlink ferry, goes past this particular building, you know, and you can see it. There is basically a gap in the buildings to the right of this particular building, so you can actually sort of look out to, well, I guess it's in this neck of the woods, fjord, you know, but basically sea loch that opens up then into the Atlantic ultimately, and basically to the right of this building, it's one sort of inlet into to the famous Scapa Flow. So we're really drawing a place that is sort of full of history, you know, really. So again, I'll just get these coins in the corner. Yeah, I'm sort of pleased with this. As a sort of first outing, using it, I think it's coming along quite well. It would be good to see what other people think, and just leave some comments down below, and it'd be good to hear what you think about this form of drawing. Obviously, you know, the way that I work, I'm a practicing architect and I work right across Britain. So I am frequently travelling, and, you know, it's quite normal for me to have a computer or a tablet, whatever, and, you know, it's just another means of drawing, you know. So that's, from my perspective, it really sort of adds to what I can do. And this window here just sort of comes down at a similar height to that one there. And just pull that in, and then the sill. And then again, it's sort of sash and case, so it sort of comes down, and then there is the lower box. And those coins just sort of wrap round, and obviously they sort of go the opposite way around. You've got the long ones on one side, or then the short ones on the other side, and they obviously then have to sort of go into the depths of the sheet. I'm just going to undo that because I didn't draw that quite as I wanted it. And that is the genius of drawing electronically, is that you get a second chance, which obviously when you're doing analog, it's not quite the same. And up here, that gutter just sort of burrows round the corner there, and we've got another downpipe that then comes down and discharges onto the lower roof there, right? Now, one thing that I'm going to do is then just begin to put some of the texture in of the slate and so on, and here you could really see how lightly I can actually draw here. This is me drawing really with not a lot of pressure. And this is responding really quite well, you know. And you can see that the electronic drawing is actually keeping up with the pen, and that really there isn't any noticeable lag in the delivery of the line. So I'll just sort of pull these across here to the left. It is, as a right-hander, it is a bit sort of odd drawing lines in that direction, but obviously it sort of helps that it just gets rid of that menu. I dare say that there is a way that I can actually switch off the menu, but this is the first time that I've drawn in this particular operating system with it, and each of them are just a little bit different, and I'll just take a wee while to warm up to this particular version, you know. So that's us got that building in, and I'm quite pleased with the way that that is sort of developing along. Now, in the background here, I could see that there is another building that sort of just comes along here, and then we've got a gutter, and we've then got a bit of a roof going back there, and then just about here, we've then got a sort of chimney coming up, and then that goes into the paper or into the computer screen like that, into the background, and we then have a chimney pot. But what that is this building in the foreground is hiding another building in the background here, and it just sort of comes along here and then pops out like so, and then just returns in there, and we have quite a big skew that comes down and sits on top of the wall. And then we've got a chimney that sort of is the partner of the chimney there to the left. So it's a sort of similar size, and then that cuts into the distance that way. And I'll just then just put in a little bit of texture. And again, you could see that I've not got overlapping lines here when I'm actually just adding in the lines as I sort of draw away here. That's working really quite well, and it's probably just about as accurate as I would draw if I was actually drawing using a pen. So we've then got another bit of sort of grass and so on here in the background, and then that goes down to the sort of harbour's edge and so on, and we've then got the building coming down here, and then because that's it in the background, so the windows are just a little bit sort of smaller, like so. Maybe just made that a little bit too small, but that's fine. And then the meeting style of the window, and then the one below that, and it sort of almost goes down to ground level there. So that's that, and then the meeting style, and then the astragal in the middle. So we've then got that building, and then to the back of that, we've then got the sort of edge of the harbour wall, and the edge of the harbour wall comes out towards us and then really sort of cranks round here like so. And we've then got I'm going to undo that because I managed to mirror the canvas there, which is not what I meant to do. Right. Yay, got it back. So just had to figure out exactly what I had done there, you know. So I think, oops, the daisy. I've also managed to go to a really thick pen. So the joys of working electronically is that sometimes when you're not really used to the program, obviously you could do certain things that you're not quite used to, like that. So but fortunately I managed to save it, so that's not so bad, as I try and do it again. So try and get rid of, yeah, that's me switched off the other menus for the moment, so that's probably a bit better. And I'm just going to get a little bit of texture of tufty grass, because that's sort of what's in the background there, and just get a little bit of texture. One thing that I've not drawn is that there is actually a sort of seat here, and I will just sort of draw that in. Yeah, so have you drawn digitally? Have you drawn with a tablet like this? It would be good to hear from you and just see what you like to do. Now, one of the things that I'm going to do is, if I bring the actual photograph back in, one of the great things is the wall textures, and I want to pick up a little bit more of this texture here in this wall. So that is going to be something that I'm now going to try and concentrate on. Now, one of the things that you can do with the screen is obviously pinch and zoom. So I'm going to pull that up a bit and drag it over a wee bit as well, and so that I've got this area here. And one of the things that I do when I tend to draw stone is I really sort of look at it and go, well, which stones are sort of catching my eye? And these two are the first two, and they're really sort of what we might say here in Scotland is sort of muckle, great big stones, you know. They're really, really big. The other thing that you could see is these really sort of long, thin stones, and that is really characteristic of Orkney and Stromness. And again, just round this bit where it begins to sort of curve round, there are some really big sort of characterful stones, and obviously in this particular scene they are sort of on a sort of stretcher bonds, and but in a lot of these sort of harbour walls and so on, you actually see the stones going in vertically, so they're much more like sort of teeth, all sort of stacked up, which is interesting, you know. But these ones really sort of caught my eye there, and I'm just sort of hopping around, and things that catch my eye I'm sort of drawing reasonably accurately. There's a weird one there, and again another great big long thin one. And I think what I'm going to do now is just lighten down the pen a wee bit, and then begin to sort of fill. Now, the other line that I think is a bit more obvious is just the sort of top line here, obviously. It's not really a coping, but it's just sort of the top of the wall in a way. And they're all really quite long and thin there. And what I'm now going to do is sort of just begin to sort of scribble the other ones in, you know, because in a way it's then sort of much more more like sort of fill in a way. Once you've got the ones that sort of really catch your eye, what you're then doing is just sort of putting in the sort of background pattern that you can also see, you know. And this is the way that I always tend to draw stonework, is get those ones that catch your eye first, and then look at the general pattern and sort of fill it. And this is beginning to do that quite nicely, I think, so that's good. But you could see that the stonework, as I'm capturing it, is quite unusual. That it may be that you've not really seen sort of stone used quite like this, you know. Have you? Again, it would be good to hear in the comments whether this is sort of typical in your area, or whether this is something which is a bit more unusual. This, in a way, is kind of like Caithness, which is just to the south of Orkney. And in Caithness, they basically sort of paved the world with Caithness flagstone, which was exported just everywhere. It was kind of like Welsh slate in a way, but it was for pavements. It's very, very typical. And you know, you actually, on some of the islands that I visited, you actually see entire roofs made of it. Huge, great big, in a way, slates. But you know, you look at some of the stones and go, well, that slate is maybe you know, a ton or something like that. It's just so big and robust, and obviously from the perspective of it being a sort of windy climate and so on, it must have been robust in the wind, you know. And clearly it was the local material, you know, and they used it as fences, and they sort of hammered the stones vertically into the ground. So they obviously used it in harbours, and they used it for houses and so on, and it was used in a sort of variety of ways. Now, the other thing that I'm going to do here is probably just put a little bit of hatch here, because the lower area of the wall, just because probably where the tide comes in is just a little bit damper, and I'm just going to pick that sort of tide mark up by just hatching it. And obviously when you're zoomed in, you obviously have to think about what the drawing will look like when you then zoom out, and obviously have to get that right as well, you know. That, you know, when you're using digital, you have to think at the scale that you're looking at it at, and actually the scale that you're then working at as well. So I'm just going to pinch and draw again, and you can still see that I'm not getting marks picking up here, so that's good. I'm just going to change that to something a wee bit bigger again, because that's what I've used elsewhere for these sort of coping stones, and there. So that's fine. And with this wall in the foreground, I'm then going to probably pull up something else. I'm going to pull up a rubber this time, and a razor, and I'm just going to take this line out here, and that was a very big eraser, so I'm going to reduce it in size. So I'm not quite happy with that bit, and then we're going to go back to the pen and just drop that down a wee bit. Yeah, that's about right. So it was in here and just pull that in there, and obviously now that I'm doing this, I'm not having to worry quite the same about the way that I'm actually affecting the menus on the perimeter. And now what you can actually see is that I've got that menu button down there, which you couldn't really see on the white drawing, but on the grey background it's much easier to see, you know. So that's why I kept pulling up things earlier on, yeah, and just get the genes in here. And again, I'll pull the eraser up and just tweak this bit just a wee bit. And then just jump back to that. So that's more along the lines of how I wanted to do that. So that's fine. So what I'm now going to do is, because this wall is probably in shadow, I'm then just going to pick out the line along the top because that seems appropriate, and drag that across there. And then hatch that along the lines of how we did the harbour wall a minute ago, but we'll do that in terms of shade this time, rather than it being the damp of the tide and so on. So just pull that in like that. Now the pen that comes with this comes with felt tip nibs, and also sort of plastic nibs, probably nylon or something like that, and they both feel really quite nice on the glass, and the glass has a coating on it which I suppose is akin to it being etched, and that gives it a tooth, so you are not sort of skating across the glass as you might on maybe some other tablets. It all feels very sort of joined up and so on. So this is me just sort of drawing away here, and again, you always, when you're zoomed in, you have to think about it zoomed in and also zoomed out. So that's us doing that. So we can see how we're beginning to come along here. So that is sort of looking about right. Now, the other thing that I want to do is that there is another pilaster a bit like this just over here. And one of the things that you could obviously do when it is a device like this is you can select things like so, and you can copy them. Now, I just have to actually figure out how you copy it. That's the one thing I don't know. So I can move it. I don't know. So I will deselect that just now, or unless I tap on that. No. So I've selected it. Move it. Oh well. Yeah, I will just deselect it and I'll draw it, right? So it's about here, and it sort of comes in a bit. I'm still selecting. I don't want to do that. I want to draw. So we're in about here. Is that where I want it? Yeah, it's about a bit closer to the window than the other one, and it sort of goes across like that. And we've then got the base, and there's then the one down below, and you've then got the pilaster going down there. So that's sort of like how it is. So we'll then drag this over so that we've got this here. And I'm now beginning to reduce the scale down because I'm beginning to draw things that are much more in the background. Now the pier runs along here and it sort of juts out, and we can then actually see the water down about here, and that sort of ziggy zags out there. And we've then got another building that sits in about here, and it's a lot smaller than the one in front, so because it's further behind. And actually the good thing is that I lightened the pen thickness there, and it's sort of working because it's in the background, so that's actually good. That was maybe a little bit accidental, but it's working out fine. Just getting the big chimneys in here. Add a chimney pot in that one as well, and then the ridge of the roof comes in here like so, and then we've got the sort of big flagstone roof coming over here. And then the gutter. And on this one, if we then sort of zoom in, I'll maybe draw this closer up. We've then got a window that is sort of here, and it's fairly big window, and I'm just going to tweak the size of the pen a little bit here, and it's got 3 panes. Maybe tweak it up a little bit again. Yeah, the window has 3 panes, and then 3 panes, and then 3 panes, and then 3 panes. And if I then make it small again, it then has a meeting style here, and all that sort of fits together in the window like so. And we've then got the sill, and we've then up in this corner we've then got a smaller window, I'll just bump that up a bit, and it is then made out of it's a 4-pane window. So the good thing about obviously drawing with these types of electronic devices that you can fiddle about with things like that, you know, which is obviously a way of a different way of sort of drawing with normal pen, where you obviously have different pens that have different sizes, you know, and you're constantly sort of looking around and going, which one am I going to use now, you know. So just a different way of working. And this bit sort of juts out a similar sort of length and comes out to here, and actually its eaves height is probably quite similar to this one here, and it comes across, and there's a gutter there, and there is a downpipe on this one. And you can see that I'm able to be really quite definite with my lines. There's a window there, and again, if I just sort of budge that up a little bit, I can then darken that window in because it's a full full wind pane, and then there in the background, and then the roof sort of tilts up a little bit, just folds up, and the ridge is sort of more or less the same height as the one next to it, but this one has a really big chimney, and there are buildings in Stromness that have absolutely enormous chimneys, and it's quite fun, you know. I really like the character of the buildings there. And then that goes into the background, and then we've got a big cope, and we've then got the actual chimney pots up there, and that also has a sill, and it then has a window which is something more or less in the middle, and again, if I just bump that up to about there, it then sort of does something like that. It's quite dark, and if I then just take that all the way down, I can then actually get the sort of slate in the background there if I then just sort of draw really quite finely. So I hope you're enjoying this, and you know, if you've got any questions or comments on the way that I draw and so on, then you know, please do just add them to the comments. That would be great. So we've now got them in the background. I think one of the things that I'll do now is that this area here also has lots of stonework and so on in it, and again, it's quite distinctive. I think I'll maybe just bump the size of the pen up just a little bit. Yeah, I think that's probably about right. And again, what I'm going to do is just pick out stones that sort of catch my eye, and these ones along the top are the first ones that catch my eye, and there's a few more there, and then there's a few down here at the bottom that are doing that as well, and yeah, there's a couple of bigger ones here and maybe here, and then yeah, maybe one about there as well. And then it's sort of there's actually more sort of white in this one, so there's more gaps in the stone, and it's sort of all been sort of mortared up and things, so it's a different sort of character in a way to that wall. And I'll just sort of doodle away here and just fill that in. But again, you could see the sort of approach that I had to try and capture that. Some of these stones are actually just a little bit, probably more tear shaped, and well, pan drop shaped or something like that. They're just a little bit more rounded in a way than the one that was in the foreground. And as I said, there's maybe just a little bit more mortar and so on as well. So just a slightly different character. But we'll get all that texture in. And that has worked fine, so that's okay. And there is then a sort of low wall that comes here, and then that sort of juts forward, and it comes to that edge there. And there is then a sort of derrick, and I'll just actually have to have a closer look to see how that works. And what we've effectively got is a sort of line that comes like that down to the deck, like so. And there is then a sort of presumably cast iron base or something like that that's there. There is then a sort of winch mechanism, and that then has a sort of metal tip to it, and there is a line that goes off there to something that's off the picture, and then the line goes up like that there, and there is another one in the background as well. Didn't spot that earlier, so that's interesting. And that wall also has a sort of texture to it, but obviously we're now sort of really sort of going into the background, so I'm going to try and do that really quite lightly, and it's so far back that there isn't really sort of feature stones. It is just all sort of texture in a way, but I'll just get these in, and you can see that the pen type that I have used is quite useful for this, because it is basically a sort of charcoal pencil pen type, and I think that is picking that out well. Now, the next thing is that the building in the foreground is a sort of cement rendered building, but this building in the middle, that is actually stone as well, and I'm just going to knock the size of the pen up just a little bit, and I'm going to try and do something similar with this as well. And the first things that I'm going to put in are the sills, because they're quite distinctive, and the other one is the lintel, and they're similarly sort of long. And we then have the sort of coin stones, and they sort of stand out quite a bit. And then that sort of juts out like that. Hopefully this continues to be interesting, just seeing how I actually draw away, you know. And as I said earlier on, the other thing that I'm doing is I'm recording this electronically as well, so we'll see how the in-app recorder works too. That will be interesting, because that bit of the app isn't available in the Windows version of it, so this is sort of new to me. I've not used it before, so that's interesting. So the other thing that I've not really picked up here is that there is, on the gutter, there is then a downpipe as well, and that goes down like so. And there are actually a couple of really quite big stones on, although they are using the flagstones, they've got some really quite big stones here on the corner. And I suppose that's because, you know, the corners have to be strong, they're facing into the gales and so on, and that just has to be robust. And there is another big stone sort of in here, and again, that's the sort of big stones sort of picked out, and then it comes into this sort of fill, as I have described it a couple of times, where it's then the sort of background pattern that I now have to just fill in, you know, around these stones. And in a way, that is actually very like how it is sort of constructed. There are these sort of keystones, as it were. Obviously not literally, because that would be an arch, but there are stones that are important in the wall, and there are then stones that basically fill in around those important ones. So get that texture in, so that's good, I think. It's working fine. And then, yeah, all of these sort of stones up here in that middle bit, again, are just sort of all filling in. So that, I think, works. That works fine. So we'll just pan out a little bit now. So that's what it is currently looking like. So I think that's about fine. And what we'll now do is we're now getting into the sort of background here. And what I can see here is that we've sort of got a horizon line about here, which is not really horizon, but it's a pier in the background. So that will actually be above the horizon because it's sitting above the waterline. And that just sort of sits out like that. And there are then the sort of legs that go into the water, and that's probably the pier for the fishing boats and so on in the background. And that just sort of fits like that. And there are handrails and so on, but there is this also the sort of normal things that you see in sort of pier heads like that, of mountains of creels and storage boxes and more creels and nets and stuff like that, so that's that. The other thing that you're beginning to see just with where we are is that you're actually beginning to see some buildings in Stromness just sort of wrap round, because it is situated on that sort of long, I suppose, fjord, but it is also in a curve, so the sort of main street in Stromness curves round, and that sort of follows through with the buildings as well. And you've then just got the hills around Stromness just shining through there in the background as well. So we've now got that in. So that's where we are now. So I think that's coming along nice. So I think what I'm now wanting to do is sort of go back to this area here and probably just add in an extra couple of lines and so on. That there is that is a moulding, so there is a sort of strong line there that goes into the paper, and again up here there is that sort of thing there underneath the gutter too, so I'll just add in an extra line there for that. So I think that's working fine. Now the next bit of it is that the building in the foreground, this sort of extension, has a lot of tooling in the cement render, and it has sort of joints and so on that are tooled into it. And I think what I want to do is now begin to sort of express them. And that's me beginning to cut that in. And again, it's very like the stonework. Obviously, it's sort of pretending to be stonework, and just try to pick the patterns and so on that it creates, so I think that's working fine. And what they've then done is they've sort of scribed stones into it. So I will just do the same thing. Yeah, and that's sort of coming along fine. So yeah, there we go. And obviously, if you sort of know how things are constructed, you don't necessarily, that's me setting off layers, so don't want to do that. But if you know how things are constructed, then you can sort of fill in a lot with your knowledge in a way, so I'm looking at the drawing to some extent, but because I also sort of know how things are constructed, I can then actually draw in a lot more simply by filling it in a way, which is what I'm doing here. So that works. So that's that extra little bit of detail in now, so that's good. Now I think the next thing that I would like to do is that if I then this is a very honest video, because there are times when I'm sort of looking at this going, how am I getting that particular menu up, you know? And it is just because it's the first time that I have used this app in this operating system, so it is slightly new to me. But if I then pull up the menus now, I'm going to start drawing in a new layer, right? And the reason for this is that at the moment I've got a line drawing there, and the line drawing I think is fine. It's really representative of what I'm looking at, I think. So that's good. But what I would now like to do is probably pick out a little bit more in terms of shadow, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to burrow this round, and I am going to begin to pick possibly a different type of I'll maybe just stick to the same pen, which is the pencil, but I am now going to just bump up its weight, and I'm going to bump up its opacity for now, right? And what I'm going to do is just experiment with shadow, right? I think I've turned it to white. That obviously doesn't work. So I must have a dropper somewhere. Yeah. Well, we'll see how we get on now, right? So yeah, that looks about right. So what I'm wanting to do is to pick shadows out. And I think that works about right. That's me just going back to check how it looks when I am zoomed out. And I'm just going to pick a couple of these lines where there really could be sort of shadow cast by things like chimneys and things like that, you know. And I'm just going to work my way around these. This also gives you the opportunity to see what the drawing looks like zoomed in, and in a way it's very like my drawing style when you actually zoom into that, you know, on an analog drawing. So that's working, I think, really quite well. Yeah, I think I'm happy with the way that I'm doing this. So this is me basically now working on the eaves, so that works fine. Now with this particular bit here, I sort of thought I drew the gutter really quite thick, so I am going to work from the bottom and I'm going to make it thinner by just pulling it out like that. And with this particular one here, I'm then going to work on the gutter like this, just because I could see it better. If you could hear something beeping in the background, that's because I'm a type 1 diabetic and my insulin pump is beeping at me for some reason, so I will have to check that, but hopefully it won't beep at me too much. but I will continue to draw the gutter in for the time being. And I'm not really drawing the gutter in. What I'm doing is I'm drawing the shadow under the gutter. That's really what I am doing at the moment. I'm going to undo that. Not happy with where I started. Yeah, that's better. And I'm going to do the same down here, underneath the string course. Yep. And I'm going to pull that out there, like so. Yep. I think that's working fine. Sort of what I want it to do. And I think the other thing that I can really sort of begin to pull out is this line here underneath the sort of big stones that forms the sort of cope in a way. This one in the foreground's sort of slightly different. It's more flush, but I'm then going to pull out this gutter here. So we've got that in, and I think the way that the sun is catching it, it's going to be this one here that's going to be in shade. Now, one of the things that you could see in terms of the way that I'm drawing is that I am manipulating the way that I'm looking at the drawing to get the lines in the way that I want them, you know. So I am obviously rotating it quite a lot to do that, and I'm just sort of doing that now with these pilasters just to get the shadow in. And I might just bump the line weight down a wee bit and get a little bit more under the string course. And you can see the way that I'm managing to get the lines to register pretty well when I'm doing this. I'm not tending to delete them all that often, so that's sort of working well. Now, I think one of the things that I'm going to do here is I'm just going to edge down the opacity of those lines, just tone them down a wee bit so that they stand out, but not stand out too much. So I'm sort of happy with that. Now, I think the next thing I am interested in is I'm going to go up here and I'm going to jump back to my pen drawing and I'm going to close this line off here, right? And the reason for that will become apparent in a minute, albeit I might undo that and I'll do it in that layer and do it now because that sort of tones in better. And I think I'm going to add another layer and I'm going to do a paint box and I'm going to get a boundary treatment that's multiple layers, and the sample, this is how, if I do that, it will probably colour everything black. If I do it here, there is a chance that because it's a pencil drawing, it won't flood the whole areas. But paint box, paint tub, and yeah, that's pretty well defined, so that's good. And I'm just going to do that there down to the landscape. And what we're now going to do is go back to the rubber, the razor, and just delete that out there. And this area down here is actually landscape, because that's the sort of headlands. Well, not the headland, but it's the hills in the background. The one thing that I always sort of find with a lot of electronic erasers, is that they are, you know, that they're a bit sort of fuzzy around the edges, and you know, erasers tend to, yeah, they can be like that, but also you could get a really sharp line with erasers. And I think electronic erasers should at times be a little bit more defined, you know, so that they don't have a fuzzy edge to them. Right, and this one has flooded the roof, so we'll just erase that back. And yeah, that's fine. And probably just take out a little bit up there, or maybe not. Add that back in, take that bit out though. And just sort of looking for how clean it is. Yeah, no, I think that's pretty clean. So we've got that. Now, what I now want to do is really tone back that opacity, but look how it then begins to actually pull the buildings out, because you've got that sort of negative that pulls out the skyline and so on. Maybe just increase that just a little bit. And yeah, I think that I'm really happy with that. So that's good. And I'm just thinking now, actually, sort of, what more will I actually draw, you know? It's beginning to get to that particular stage of just now beginning to see sort of what I might do next. You know, there's definitely a bit of texture there in the grass. But we are beginning to get to the stage where I'm sort of going, well, that's probably about it for the moment, you know. I think it would be interesting to hear from you what you think, you know, and actually, you know, whether you've actually used devices like this and so on, and you know what your expectation of them is, and you know whether you actually like the experience, or you know, just your reaction to the whole digital drawing experience would be really interesting. Yeah, and I'm just checking my blood sugar, and it's a bit high at the moment, so I'm gonna take a bit of insulin to try and bring that down. Yeah, so yeah, please do join in the comments and let me know, and we'll see how all of that turns out. The one thing that I'm not all that sure about, actually, is I'm just going to jump out of that and go to the control panel. Just want to go to the control panel if I can. Yeah, as I thought, screen brightness had sort of toned down a little bit, so it's interesting just to see it with a brighter screen again, which is obviously quite useful. Yeah, I think I might begin to do things where I begin to get things like the terracotta of the chimneys in. So let's go back to, or maybe create a new layer, and just begin to splash in the colour That wasn't terribly good. Just take that back. Yeah, just splashing some colour for the chimneys. Oops. Didn't mean to colour the whole drawing. Yeah, that's the sort of things that you just have to be careful of when you're doing digital drawings. But obviously there's, for the first time using this app, I think there's been one or two surprises as I've done things, you know. This particular chimney is a sort of bluey black one, so I'm gonna capture that one just because it's a wee bit different. And going back to the ridge tiles on this side, they are a bit more sort of in that sort of colour range again. So let's just drop in a little bit of colour for that, and a little bit of colour there, a little bit, too much. I'll maybe revert to the drawing and actually draw that in. Yeah, that just pulls that out, so that's good. And the ridges in the foreground again are the sort of blacker, and that's the paint dropper. It is interesting that, you know, in each app, the arrangement of how the tools are arranged are just slightly different. Oh yeah, I need to go back to that. Yeah. And go back to the pencil. Yeah, so we've got that there. Yeah, I'm less sure about the black there. So the beauty of this is that I can undo. So I've kept the ones that are coloured, and I've taken out those black ones, which I think is the right thing to do. Now, the next thing is that the door is painted a really sort of dark green, this door over here, and we'll just zoom into that a little bit. Yeah, and I think that what we'll do is we will draw it yeah, I'm going to undo that. Wasn't happy with where I drew it. So down here and up this bit. Then over the top, and we'll go into this and we will splash the colour in. Now, because we have put this on another layer, we have sort of made it transparent, and we will then go to the eraser and we'll tone down the size. And we'll just kick that out of the letterbox and the door handle and the lock, and just take maybe a little bit out the top, but maybe not that much. Just give it a little shave. Yeah, I think that's fine. And yep, no, redo. And if we then go to that, we'll then deselect. So I think that sort of pulls your eye in a little bit there. And we'll maybe just nudge down the opacity of that again, just to sort of tone it in. And the other thing is that this window up here has a really blue curtain, and I'm going to yep, probably about there. And we will now just drop that in. Yeah, I'm sort of liking the way that it's sort of beginning to go, and that is sort of looking good just with those little bits of spot colour, I think. And that is sort of working quite well. I'm enjoying that. But I don't think I'm going to add that much more. So I think I'm going to call it a day at that. And let's see, as I enlarge that, what you think. You could obviously zoom in and zoom out to your heart's content, and you know, I think that's quite an interesting thing to do. It might be that I could always add a little bit of shadow to pull out the 3D form, and it might be that I do it on that gable and that gable there. You know, that might be something that I could do, but it would probably want to be a colour more like that. And if we then sort of dropped it in, not so sure about that colour. Yeah, that seemed a little bit green, that previous one. Yeah, that might be a bit better. But obviously we would want to catch the coins on the corner, and we wouldn't want to hit that one. Yep. And we might then splash it in here too. Now, if we do that and we tone that all the way back, I'm wondering whether I actually go for something that's a sort of stronger blue, and that I then splash it in. Oops, that was maybe a little bit too much. Instantly changes it to the Mediterranean. sometimes it's interesting when you actually make these mistakes and the colours sort of go awry like that. Yeah, it can be interesting. But I'm just going to pull that out like that, and yeah, I wonder whether that sort of cool blue might be round about the right sort of tone for it, yeah? But if I do that there, then I could sort of follow that through in other areas. Do that again. And then that's round that window. And then that's round that window, round that window. And you could begin to see that it's just beginning to pull out that 3D form. Do it there. I won't do it around that window because I'll come back to that and maybe do that there. Yeah, I think that works fairly well, I think. So the next thing that I really need to do is go around all of these sort of stones here. Oops. And maybe just need to tone that back a bit again. Yeah, and then just sort of dab it in here into the grass, and then I've got these coins around the window. So, oh, and I've got a stray one there that I need to just take out. So I've got that there. So that sort of come along, I think, reasonably well, and obviously we could zoom in and out as we want, you know, and that works quite well. I've then got a couple of bits up here. Oops. Yep. And that goes in, and yeah. Yeah, I think I'm going to call it a day. I think that's me for the moment, you know. And I think that as a first drawing on a new device, I am really quite pleased with that. So I hope you've enjoyed that. I hope you've enjoyed looking at me sort of fiddling around and making it up as I go along. And oh, I've discovered another thing that I can do, that bit there. And hopefully you've enjoyed that, learnt something about it, and that you're maybe interested in starting up digital drawing if you've not already done that. Yeah, so thank you very much for listening into my meanderings, and have a look at my feeds, and hope to speak to you again sometime soon. Thank you very much. Goodbye.